Hello, everybody. Thank you for waiting diligently and in the waiting room until exactly 4 o'clock before we started the webinar. Good afternoon, good morning, wherever you may be located. Thank you for coming along to, I suppose, the beginning of summer sessions of innovation webinars. And today's webinar is a good one, and we have a great guest that has joined us for this. And it's a scary title, How to Thrive During a Skills Emergency. So I suppose you're all here because you're living the skills emergency, and I suppose we feel your pain, and we want to talk about that a little bit and understand what is the skills emergency and how we can not just live through it but thrive through it. So just to talk about so this webinar is not going to be a long one. I'm super conscious that everybody today is fairly zoomed out, and are probably kind of looking for kind of short webinars. So we're going to try and stick to around 30 minutes for this particular webinar. So the structure is quite simple. We're going to first look at the skills emergency. What is it? What's it all about? Look at industry literature, things like that. Then we're going to look at important avenues for you to explore to help alleviate the skills emergency, and through things like company structure, employee experience, looking at engagement, all that sort of good stuff. And then we're going to dig into technology a bit, of course, and we're going to look at, in particular, the latest Totara talent experience platform, and look at how that can help with this skills emergency. But before going to all that, let's start with the basics on who is speaking to you. So two speakers today. We're delighted to have Lars Hyland, Chief Learning Officer from Totara, who you're going to hear a lot from. So in order for you to get used to his voice, I'm going to let him introduce himself.
Thanks, Mark, and hello, everyone. Yes, I'm Lars Hyland. I'm the Chief Learning Officer here at Totara Learning. We're an organisation that's global, but headquarters over in Wellington, New Zealand, and I'm currently speaking to you from Brighton in the UK. So we're sort of opposite sides of the planet, but delighted to be speaking with you all today.
Thanks, Lars. So. And I'm Mark Melia. I'm Chief Product Officer with Enovation, and I suppose Enovation is a Totara premium partner, and we provide. My role is basically look at our products portfolio, make sure we have all the technologies needed for the very different and changing landscape of HR and learning and development in today's world. So, and always interested to hear feedback from different people. So to kick off a little bit of interactivity to start the conversation. So we're going to start off with a live poll, and our Zoom magician Emma, working diligently in the background, should hopefully have our poll up and running now. So it's a simple question to start off, and we're interested in your key challenges today. So what do you see as the key challenges in your organizations right now? So we're looking at things like reskilling, upskilling existing talent. So obviously looking at a learning issue, attracting talent, retaining talent, keeping remote workers engaged. Engagement seems to be a hot topic. Budget and strategic initiatives, employee engagement, and then diversity, equity, inclusion is obviously really important at the moment, and be interested in hearing people discussion on that, and strategic skills planning for future growth. Lars, any favorites there yourself?
Well, the skills challenge is one we're going to be talking quite a bit about today. So I think that's top of mind, as is the perennial issue of talent, finding talent, holding on to talent, and that big issue of engagement. So let's have a look at the results.
Okay, so we have a tie, generally speaking. So it's all around. Okay, budget is always a problem. Employee engagement, yes, strategic skills planning. So yeah, right on topic. Retaining talent, so it's a learning agenda there. And I suppose keeping remote workers engaged. And I think we'll talk a little bit about that as well today. So thank you, and we will. I suppose we'll hop right into the first discussion about the skills emergency. And Lars, you've done a bit of research on this already.
Well, indeed. I mean, I think this is, as you said, top of mind for everyone. And increasingly, I think every day the news is now pointing to various challenges around finding people, holding on to people, actually having people with the wrong skills to be able to really thrive in the future. So here we're pointing to a particular report that was in October 2020, so it's a few months ago, but it's well worth a read because it's by the World Economic Forum. It's covers the future of jobs, and there's a headline figure that's quite startling, really. You know, the need to reskill more than 1 billion people by 2030. So that's not even 10 years. You know, we're well into 2021. We're struggling with a pandemic, which has accelerated a number of long-term trends, I think, which were underpinning and building to this skills challenge anyhow, not least because of the digital transformation that many organizations are still moving through. I mean, a number have made good strides in those directions, but there's still plenty to do. And I think you can see that just over the past 12, 18 months, which organizations were better prepared to cope with an unexpected event such as a pandemic. Some could move their people remotely. Some people just really couldn't. You know, they really struggled to function as an organization for some time. So I think being ready for unexpected events and change is a critical skill. And in fact, if we just go on to the next slide.
Well, just one thing. It's interesting. Just one thing, note that I have on this slide, because I had a look at this as well. And what I found interesting about this is that I mentioned this in the precursor, Lars, to you. I was at an event of the 2019 launch of this same report. Now, obviously pre-COVID, but the same problems were there. And there's an initiative called Future Skills Ireland, which is basically a government initiative that's meant to bring policymakers together. And Sadi Zahidi, who's one of the chief executives of the World Economic Forum, was at that, and she was briefing government ministers and policymakers on this problem. Okay, and what was very interesting was the room was full of fear. Essentially, they could not get their head around these numbers. And what I found very interesting was that governments generally go through election cycles. Okay, so 5 years is a long time for them. They generally plan for 5 years, but this is a long-term strategic initiative that the Irish government are looking at. And if a government is looking at that long-term kind of outlook, then organizations really need to start looking at this as well. And I think what also has happened is, now that COVID has happened, it's demonstrated what they were talking about in 2019, that we can have a two-tier economy where people will lose their jobs on one hand, and people will make significant gains. Pretty much, there are people that have a lot more income because of COVID. They didn't spend any money, so they have probably a bigger bank account at the moment. So you have massive inequality happening but that's just an acceleration of what the report in 2019 was pointing to, really. And what I found really interesting as well, 50% of companies want to reskill employees, but is easier to make people redundant for people that are displaced through technological automation than reskill them. So that is a problem, and that's something that us as the L&D community need to kind of tackle head on. Sorry.
Yeah. So Mark, that's I totally agree. And the challenges are multiply, frankly. The same will be the case in many countries around the world. I mean, just look at the US, where there's attempts to really drive quite deep change, fundamental change, which is politically difficult to do, but there's a growing imperative to really rise to that challenge. So what does that look like? When we get just down the road, I mean, it's recognized also that this type of skills that we need are quite different to the ones that we're perhaps used to in the past or currently deploying in roles that we have. So you can see this list as there's 10 key skills, the top skills that the report pointed to. I've highlighted one, which I'm sure we're all feeling the need for, which is the ability to be resilient in the face of unexpected events and change. You know, you need some stress tolerance, positive stress tolerance, respond positively to it rather than negatively. And that at the heart of it, we all need to be quite flexible, or more flexible, in the face of how we go about our work and how we interact with others as well. So it's these are challenging skills and behaviors to develop. Not everyone is ready-made for those things, but I think, rest assured, it's much more likely to be driving and be the main things that we're having to deal with in no matter what roles that we do have. If you look elsewhere in that list, you'll see that there's an emphasis on, you know, more complex cognitive type skills. So it's less about operational, repetitive type tasks, because those are the ones that are subject to, or more likely to be automated in multiple ways. So it's honest. I think there's a personal, or, you know, individual imperative really to start thinking about how those skills can be built up, and really looking at how you as L&D professionals or HR professionals can influence the direction of travel for the learning support that you're offering in your organizations, to really prepare both the organization but also your people to be much more resilient and relevant. Actually, it's probably a key word here, down the line. So yeah, it's we need to act now, because, you know, with the headline that you see here on the screen right now, 2025 is where these skills need to be in place, if we're going to hit the 2030 targets for being in a position to operate effectively in the economic environments that we're going to see, and not just that, just the environment full stop, because a big driver here is obviously the climate initiatives that are far more imperative now than they've ever been.
Yeah, I think the one you've drawn out here, resilience, stress tolerance, and flexibility, is absolutely key. And during kind of the prep, we talked about, you know, crisis upon crisis is how we're going to live. You know, it's a perpetual state of crisis, and that we need to get used to that. You know, we've climate change, we've COVID. There's something else going to come down the line. There's obviously social and movements and things like that are changing the way we work and all that sort of thing. So, and I think one of my colleagues in Houston in Enovation USA describes this as he used a US military term, which describes it as a VUCA world that we live in. So it's a world of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And she would kind of mention that leadership needs to combat that with another type of VUCA, which is vision, understanding, clarity, and agility. And I think we're seeing a lot of agility through the kind of COVID world, even in the online learning space. So some of the things called out in the report you mentioned is that we've seen a fourfold increase in the number of individuals seeking out online learning of their own initiative. So these are people outside their companies and paying money to find learning opportunities online to upskill. And that increases to a 9 times increase, or 9-fold increase, if it's through a government initiative. And what's also interesting is what people are learning. So people in employment are concentrating on the skills to become employed. So they're generally looking at digital skills, learning digital skills, hard skills. And then people that are in employment are looking at personal development skills. So it's kind of like, if you're out of work, you're learning how to get into work, and when you're in work, you're learning how to cope with work. So it's an interesting point, and I think it also points to a change in how managers need to help employees with the transitioning and the reskilling, and this is a key part of managing people now. It's not something you could just offload to HR or offload to an L&D department. It's core to your role. And I think that I'm going to throw out a very old quote from Charles Handy, who's an economic social philosopher who actually grew up in Clane, which is very close to where I am here at the moment. And he said, whereas the heroic manager of the past knew all, could do all, and could solve every problem, the post-heroic manager asks how every problem can be solved in a way that develops other people's capacity to handle it. And I think that sums up exactly where we need to get to. So I'm going to go to the next slide, and we're going to get audience participation time again. Okay, so this time is to make sure you're able to use Zoom chat. So the question is, we're looking to understand, what do you see as key to future-proofing your workforce? Okay, what do you have any initiatives underway that you can share, or that you are that you're looking to kind of embed in the next year, 12 months, to future-proof your workforce? It could be learning, it could be a diversity and inclusion scheme, it could be even something around internal mobility, around stretch exercises, development activities, things like that. So we're interested in understanding what people are doing in that space. And I am going to just open up the chat window and see what people are saying, and don't be shy. So Lars, do you have any thoughts on this?
Well, plenty. I mean, if at the end of the day, you know, we're both operating on in trying to provide support for organizations of all shapes and sizes to help them develop their workforce appropriately. You know, I think future-proofing your workforce is it's very difficult to come up with one answer, I'd argue. You know, I think there's plenty of I think the key thing here is being comfortable with change, and being comfortable with always reevaluating what you're currently doing and what might be the best practice. In fact, there's probably need to drop that phrase of best practice and always think of, you know, there's better practice. There's always something better that you could be adopting to. And even radically shifting and changing it, being open to dropping a best practice completely in favor of a completely different approach.
Unlearning and relearning. Yeah.
Well, that's right. And reconfiguring how your business operates, or how your people interact and collaborate with each other more readily. I think one way of doing that is to be much more transparent. So opening up visibility across the organization as to what different teams are doing. So it opens the door to sort of almost random useful interventions from others, which can dramatically, could solve problems that you didn't realize were already solved in another part of the organization, for example, just by being much more transparent in how you share what you're up to and what you're doing.
Yeah. Okay, in the interest of time, because I'm just conscious as well, we promised 30 minutes. We might go slightly over, but I'm going to just keep going here. So yeah, I'll let you kind of kick off with the how we can help conversation.
Sure. So, I mean, just continuing what I was saying about transparency, too often I think HR functions in organizations, particularly as they get larger, tend to get quite siloed into separate teams. So in terms of those who are on this this session, you know, you may be inside an L&D type team. You may have a completely separate internal comms team. There may be another group that's focused on defining the performance management processes that your organization operates to. And then you get the usual leadership initiatives and priorities that sometimes get parachuted in on over you all of a sudden. And yet none of these things can be that well coordinated. So if you're any one individual worker or employee, it can be quite confusing or even frustrating. And the end result can be that any communication or attempt to sort of create some action falls on deaf ears, essentially. You know, people won't listen because it's not been well coordinated. So breaking down those silos, I think, is really critical, and that thinking about the different dimensions of what shifts people's behavior. It's not just learning, and it's not just feedback. And it's not just inspiration and engagement. You need all three of these things to interact and to conduct them a bit better, or much better. One of the things I think that is driving this fundamental change is that organizations themselves are finding that the more conventional approach of top-down command and control, planning things long term, that model is breaking down in the face of of the economic reality that we find ourselves in, and the societal reality that we find ourselves in, to one that's much more oriented towards a bottom-up approach, which is fundamentally more open. It's more flexible. It's focused around getting things done, around a shared understanding of what your organization is all about in terms of its purpose and passion, and that there's it's built into the DNA is collaboration, a much more equitable, meritocracy perhaps driven approach to decision making, which has its own challenges. The typical extremes of these are, a military type of thinking with conventional organizations, top-down command and control. And that can work for certain environments and situations, clearly. But then in the face of pretty much random or complicated and unpredictable events, then a much more open and collaborative approach is going to be more effective, much more adaptable approach. You can almost think of these two things as just one final point on this,
Sorry.
Mark, is that the conventional organization is in musical terms like a classical piece, and then the open organization is much more of a jazz piece. And alluding to what we were talking about earlier about what can we do to future-proof people? Well, when people work together as teams, being able to be more mindful of what others are doing around you, and being able to be flexible in the face of their actions and vice versa is actually the way teams can respond better to the challenges we currently have.
But I think one of the things I would just want to add to that, the meritocracy aspect is I think driving a lot of change at the moment, and like obviously there's a big DEI conversation happening at the moment, but it's absolutely critical that organizations figure out how to make all their decisions transparent, so people know why these decisions are made, and also just to keep the organization accountable, so that people, it's not about the conversation on the golf course anymore. It's about how people perform and what value they add to the organization. And I think that's absolutely critical, and it's great change to see and progression we can see happening right now.
Yeah, indeed. So how do you go about doing this? And I just alluded to what I think are the three key components of the experience that we have at work. So the employee experience loop or cycle. If you manage it correctly, it becomes a virtuous cycle rather than a vicious circle that can really positively shift the overall performance of the organization, as well as the individuals that make up that organization. So being able to train people effectively, develop their skills, satisfy career ambitions is key, and having those opportunities clear and available, and not hidden or inadvertently hidden, is key to that. Engaging people so that they are aware of what the ambitions are of the organization, and what their team, both locally their teams, but also why that organization is doing what it's doing. And increasingly people are feeling the need to be engaging with a purpose that resonates with their own values as well. So being clear in how you communicate that will ensure that the people that are in your organization are on side, if you like, rather than working against you. Which can happen if there's dysfunction. And finally, performing, being able to provide good, constructive, continuous feedback rather than the annual performance review in isolation. That's not that effective, perhaps, in really influencing good change, because the change is that an organization is facing is no longer annual, it's monthly, if not daily. I mean, just today, there's been the news, we've had a massive internet outage. So if you were working at The Guardian, for example, would have been panicking for about 60 minutes or so, or 90 minutes. It was, how do you cope with situations like that? It's important to be able to be resilient in face of that.
just Lars, on the performance aspect, and I know this is something that comes up with a lot of people I speak to. So performance, people want to move to agile performance, continuous improvement, all that sort of good stuff, but they've linked their pay and benefits, which is on a yearly cycle, to performance reviews. Do you have any ideas on that?
Well, it's a good point, because I think that's quite common. I mean, that's a very traditional approach, arguably, where you've got more continuous models in place. Then the focus is on key results, so the actual objectives and results. So if they get achieved, whenever they get achieved, you could attach rewards to that moment. So, and in a way that if taken to its extreme, and I'm not suggesting we should do, but that meritocracy comes through there. So when people do make really strong strides to meeting those objectives and delivering those results, then the rewards would flow there. So why wait a year, if you like? Equally, it works the other way. You're getting early feedback if the performance isn't really delivering those results, in which case, corrective action, hopefully constructive, but sometimes necessary action needs to be taken to handle it. So again, why wait a year for that continued poor performance to affect the individual plus the organization?
Absolutely. You can take to the nth degree. I was on a talk with Redline Research. I was as a participant yesterday, and they were talking about a client who has a dollar value against each skill and each proficiency level. So if you drop a proficiency level in a skill, your pay packet will drop. If you gain a skill and you gain proficiency, your pay packet will increase. So that's taken to the nth degree.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. So if we dig into this a little bit more and look at it from a learning perspective, particularly, I guess the audience may well be hopefully familiar with these 5 steps. Now, this has been a nice and cleanly articulated by McKinsey, so I've sort of taken it from there. But they talk about an intentional learning culture, so nurturing and building one. And what that means is that any learning interventions or programs or experiences, should we say, that you're creating should be constructed with these 5 key elements in place. So set small, clear goals. So this points to what has been a broader trend, I think, in building learning activities which are much more targeted. The term micro-learning has been around for a while, but in its broadest sense, it's much more digestible to work through a series of smaller, clearer activities than it is monolithic, multiple hours worth of e-learning, for example, or even face-to-face courses or virtual Zoom courses. So breaking that down is really critical. When you are offering or asking people to learn, then you remove distractions. So you create the space for that learning to happen. Feedback is there. So just as we were saying before, there is continuous feedback available, both from peers and sort of managers or mentors, and that there's an opportunity to actually deliberately practice those skills. So you're not doing training abstracted from your job and not able to apply them in a measured manner. So deliberately practicing those skills is really critical to embedding that learning, as is reflection. So thinking about what you've done, being able to reflect on that and to then course correct as a result. So I would encourage everyone to put those 5 elements into, or check that you've got each of those 5 things in anything that you're building. So just to sum up, really, what we've done at Totara is build a platform that talks to the 3 things that we were pulling out earlier: learning, engagement, and performance. And that this is built on research that is demonstrating what really does motivate us in the workplace. So it's it's not just top-level rewards. Obviously, that's a key hygiene factor for anyone in any job. But what really keeps us performing at a high level is the ability to learn. So to acquire mastery in our chosen skills, so we can build them, and that we have the space, the psychological safety, which talks to the DEI, I think, focus as well, is making sure we have a working environment that is healthy for all and diverse as well, welcomes diverse thinking, and we can challenge each other without harmful recourse, which that's how good creative thinking and change and collaboration happens. And that we're doing that aligned around a real common set of values and purpose, as we were talking to earlier. So what does that look like? It means that you're bringing together formal, informal learning, building blended experiences that are much more integrated with the performance management processes that you have. So the feedback mechanisms are continuous and supporting that process. Plus also you've got clear communication happening at the right moments to sustain that engagement throughout. So building all of those things together, that breaks down those, so you sort of have to transcend those silos that you would normally have in a wider HR function, and that with a platform that brings these three things together, it gives you all the levers and the tools to be able to build that culture effectively. So this is what we're aiming for, I think. I'd be interested to know if people agree in the chat here, but we want this virtuous cycle where we all feel part of a cohesive team that's working together, that, you know, I do have access to the right resources on the job to do my job, that the tools work, you know, there's no frustration or friction there, and that I'm getting recognized, you know, for the work I do, you know, in an appropriate manner. And I know what needs to be done because I'm getting the feedback, and that I'm constantly improving those skills. So it's this cycle. If we can really embed that for every individual and personalize it, I'd say, for each individual person, then you're going to be in good shape as an organization as well. It's not just us saying this, Mark and Lars saying that this is the right way to go. If you look out to Gartner, Josh Bersin, Red Thread, Fosway and others, they're all predicting that the technology that you need to bring into your organization needs to be much more flexible, needs to be adaptable and integrate well into an ecosystem of tools that are designed to support you better. That way, you know, breaking away from too monolithic or proprietary often systems is not really fit for purpose now.
We didn't make it up.
No.
Okay, final poll. We're nearly at the end. I know I'm a little bit over in my 30 minutes promise, but we're very close to the end. So I just want to get your thoughts on this final one. Just interested in where you know, people say follow the money, so I'm interested in understanding where people plan to invest and what's of key importance to organizations over the next 12 months. And so what we're looking at here is obviously learning, employee engagement platforms, remote working tools, performance management systems, tools to promote internal mobility, so to help people move from one job or role to another job. In the World Economic Forum's report, they talk a lot about people moving from one role to another and trying to, and from a variety of different roles, and even roles that you wouldn't think there's transferable skills. So I'm interested in understanding if anybody's has an interest in that. And it's just gone, so I don't know what the other ones were. So okay, so it's all about learning and employee engagement and remote working tools. So that's probably no surprise with the world we live in. So just to close out, I'm just going to very quickly just build on what Lars has talked about. And as Lars said, it's not an accident that we have perform, engage, and learn in Totara. Like it's built on real research into what motivates people. And one of the key seminal pieces of work that I encourage everybody to read, it's a brilliant piece of work, Daniel Pink's book Drive. 10 years, you know, it's a relatively, I suppose it's not a new book at this stage, but it's well worth a read. And what we're trying to do is with Totara is build a platform that brings us to this place of effective learning, employee engagement, and better performance. And I'm not going to fill you with full of screenshots, but I'm just going to show you, bit 4 screens to give you an idea of how this comes together in a complete package that brings all these concepts together, and just give you kind of an insight into that. So what we're talking about is a platform that essentially gives a central focal point to what's going on from a learning perspective, from a collaboration perspective, and from an employee development and performance perspective. So it's anchoring them to understand what they need to learn now, what they need to learn in the future, and also bringing all that kind of compliance stuff that's obviously required for anybody in the L&D game. From a learning perspective, we're looking to do really kind of innovative stuff. This is an example from one of our clients, Transitions Optical, who we worked with to build this kind of unique 30-day challenge to help educate their learners to basically onboard them on particular products that they offer. So it's gamifying the process. It's bringing in micro learnings. It's also bringing in mini challenges, which brings in the kind of what Lars talked about, giving the space to try stuff out and do things. So the transfer of learning, all very key things. But it's a very engaging way to get people started, get people up and running, and it's been extremely successful for them. We also talk about how to bring together communities of practice so that formal learning will only get you so far, but to really dig into topics and to kind of explore them in a much deeper level. It's about debating and conversing and sharing and all that sort of good stuff. And this is where Totara's Engage tool basically helps that. Gives a space for people to come together, discuss topics, discuss problems, share material, and basically collect and curate content around particular initiatives or concepts, and basically have a trusted community that they can go to and talk to about a particular problem or a concept in a safe space, which is obviously a key thing for learning, doing it in a safe space. And then the final piece of the puzzle is Perform, which basically is giving us the tools to allow us to understand where we stand in terms of our performance around our role. So if we're a team leader, a sale, or in a sales organization, what that proficiency level looks like, where our competencies are falling down, where those gaps are, where we need to work on. And it's not a surprise when we walk into that appraisal discussion that there's gaps there that we need to work on. So it's all very transparent. The final piece that I just want to talk about is Josh Burson, obviously has a very old article at this stage talking about learning the flow work is the future. Learning the flow work is right now, and it's where Totara is in its element basically. So Totara can be embedded into your Microsoft Teams, which is a lot of people are using as their obviously system of execution, where people are coming together, communicating, working, and Totara can sit right inside that. So we don't need to go outside to a different platform to do our learning. We can do within the platform, and has chatbots and all that sort of stuff to keep you on topic and knowing what's going on. So again, I didn't want to go obviously go screen by screen by screen, but that's just a flavor really, just to give you an idea, just to get on the last few slides to give you an idea what's going on in the Totara world. So we are finished. I have gone slightly over time, but not terribly over time, which is not too bad. If there's any questions, please stick them into the chat. But while you're thinking of your questions, I just want to bring to your attention there's 2 things. Okay, so there's a excellent ebook available exclusively for all our audience. So if you go to this bit.ly link here, you will basically get this 5 workplace disruptors that can kill you or make you stronger. That is available to you if you wish to get it. The other thing that we would ask you to do is obviously follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn, which details, of course, are here as well. And as I mentioned at the very outset of our conversation, this is the start of our summer sessions. So we have 2 sessions coming up in July. LMS and LXP, why they are complementary. In here, this is going to be my colleague Terry Fannin is going to talk about how bringing together an LXP and LMS can be quite a a complementary affair to bring around learner engagement. And then collaborative and social learning, where to start. That's going to focus in on Totara Engage and how to use that platform to maximum effect. So just to remind you, can't make it, of course, just register. You'll get the recording. So I'm going to the final thing, just to kind of, I suppose, to wrap up, is just to kind of recap. So essentially, what we did today is looked at the skills emergency. It's there, it's real, it's scary, but we've hopefully given you some tools to alleviate it and thrive in it, and some tools around organizational structure, around how to organize your HR department. And then we've looked at technology and where technologies, in particular, Totara's talent experience platform can really help you take it by the scruff of the neck, as we say here, and thrive within this world. Any parting comments, Lars?
Well, just don't panic. That's one thing.
Sorry.
Don't panic, and just I think take a good look at what you're currently doing, and just start making some improvements. Start small, get win some small successes, and then build that communication with your senior leadership around the importance of building out what needs to be a much more flexible ecosystem of tools that will support you going forward.
Excellent. Okay, a little bit over time, so we're going to leave it there. Thank you very much for attending, and we look forward to seeing you next time. So thank you very much. Bye from me.
Thank you.